Hello and welcome to another episode of the Coaches Club podcast, brought to you by halftimecuppa.com. My name is Charlie Pumfrey and I am extremely pleased to bring you a fantastic episode today featuring, you'll recognise these, well, actually you might not recognise these faces, but you'll recognise these voices. Danny Cook, you're with me today. How are you doing, Danny? We'll check in
I'm
with
good,
you,
Charlie. Yeah, thanks for having me this side of the podcast. Thanks for stepping in and hosting. Appreciate that.
No problem, Dan. How you? And then, as well, joining Danny, Rob and Amanze. These two know each other very well. I just get to sit here and ask him questions. How you doing, Rob?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Charlie. Echo Danny's thoughts. Thank you for hosting.
Good. But well, before we jump right in, you can catch up with any of our previous episodes on iTunes or on our website now. As I said before, at halftimecuppa.com or halftime_cuppa over on Twitter. They'll keep you inundated with all the information. But I think as we begin, let's start with a little bit of the chat. Obviously, we're coaches. It's been a tough couple of months. I mean, on my end, I haven't coached in 3 months. We were talking about it briefly before we started recording. But you guys, obviously, you coached together. What did you sort of do with your team during lockdown? Now we're back into a national lockdown again. Where did you sort of start to react to that? What was your initial process?
It's if you don't mind me kicking off, Rob. It was an interesting conversation we had. We shared a couple of ideas as we approached lockdown 2, actually. So it was about end of October when the second national lockdown, obviously in the UK, was announced. That it was going to start in November. I'm sure Rob, when Rob gives his thoughts in terms of how we as a team are sort of developing this season, we'd just come off of probably arguably our worst result performance on and off the pitch. So we had a really tough time pre the second lockdown. So Rob and I and another coach that we work with, a really good coach called Razak, we discussed between us ways in which we could try and get our team to sort of bond a bit more. And Rob, I don't know if you want to just share your thoughts on or give a bit of context in terms of the game that we'd come off the back of and maybe how disjointed it was, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. It's strange sometimes how timing occurs where we were probably coming off, like Danny mentioned, our worst performance of the season where as a team we just lacked real communication and work ethic and real commitment as a group. And we all kind of left the pitch that particular day thinking, what's going on really? It was a bit of a bad point in our season. And then literally, sadly, a few days later, we get the notification about the second lockdown. So it was almost like, okay, this might be an opportunity, not an opportune time to kind of do a reset almost, and do some work with the team during that period, as Danny mentioned just now, to get the gelling together and to get them working together, and most importantly, get them bonding as a group, I think, because it has been a difficult point of the season. And it almost felt as if, now was maybe a good time to see if we can explore this while we're at home and what we can do about it.
That's really interesting hearing from both of you guys there. It's sort of when you lose a big game like that or you have a poor performance, it's the sort of time you want to be snapping back and being able to, putting things into practice. And obviously a lockdown just completely negates that effect. So it's good to hear that you're looking at other ways of delivering a message, which is good. So was there anything specific you did in that time then? After in those first couple of weeks, I can't remember how long the exact, because I moved to Northern Ireland in that time, so English lockdowns have been a bit beyond me recently. But what did you do in those first 7 days, that first 14 days then, that you really put into practice with your squad?
Yeah, so we spoke immediately after the game, and over that weekend, obviously discussing what went on and different ways we could do things. After we bounced a couple of ideas off each other, we kind of came to a idea of having some kind of inter-squad competition where the players were put into teams, and the idea being with us selecting those teams that we could really sort of mix and match who was in each of those teams, really get those to gel. Because as Rob mentioned, we had probably up to that point maybe 2 big different groups, but not a big group. And we really saw it as an opportunity to gel them a bit more off the pitch, in the hope that it benefits us on the pitch. So we went about doing that. We did quite a few calls, Skype calls, phone calls. Rob and I were in constant contact. It feels like every single day. Rob's probably sick of hearing me. But we got to a stage where we felt like we was going to do this competition, and I'm pretty sure, and Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we launched it the following Sunday or the following Saturday.
Yeah, it was on 8th of November, which was a Sunday. Yeah.
Wow, quick turnaround then.
Yeah, I mean, we had to do a lot of planning ahead of that. So that week was pretty much a case of, because how the competition was run, it was run online, obviously, with the fantastic power of Google Drive and all of those functionalities on there of Google Forms. We basically was able to run some kind of online competition, which allowed players within their teams to submit based on the competitions and based on the challenges. So yeah, it was a really quick turnaround. I think we did a presentation to them, announced the first couple of challenges, which I'm sure Rob will probably tell us a little bit more about some of those challenges. But yeah, it was a really quick turnaround. We did a lot of groundwork and planned for, I guess, the first week or first 2 weeks of challenges. And then throughout, it was just a constant review and just adding more and more as we went along.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. It's good that you've been able to have that planning. I know as coaches, it's kind of, we spend a lot of time planning our sessions, and then when something potentially doesn't go right in a session, it's about thinking on your feet then. And it's good to see you're taking that and applying it to, let's be honest, the situation none of us probably anticipated 18 months ago. But so yeah, you talked there about the lockdown show, and you've talked a bit. Well, spoiler alert, that's what it's called. I've got it right in front of me. Spoiler alert, we do plan these occasionally, obviously. But how did it work in terms of those competitions? If you can give us maybe an example of something you did. I know as a coach, I find it really useful when a coach can give me kind of an idea of what they did and build off that potentially.
Yeah, sure.
Go then, Rob. You can have this one.
Thank you. So I think, from our perspective, there were a couple of going back to the original point about the gelling and the boys working together as a group. There were a couple of, I guess, key factors. I think Danny and I and Coach Razak were thinking about that we wanted to get the boys involved in anyway. And what the lockdown situation did is it gave us a chance to do this as a challenge almost. So to give you an example of one, Daddy was very strong on creating some sort of template for like a player contract. So this is quite serious, but in the end, it's just done in a quite positive way. So we asked the boys, we have a leadership group within our team. So we have 2 captains, and then we have 4 players who are kind of our ambassadors, who are strongest influence within the club, so it's 6 players. And they kind of put together some bullet points of non-negotiables, so like supporting the teammates, supporting your coaches, respecting the referee. And then we had this listed out, and then what we did is we then asked the boys to sign the form virtually with a signature scanned, and that was them agreeing the commitment level to that contract. So they could see it in advance, and then them physically signed it. It was them saying, "Yeah, I'm part of this. I'm part of this team, and I abide by these guidelines." Basically, that's something that we thought would be a good idea anyway to do, but we added it as a challenge to get some points for your team. So that's the incentive. But at the same time, we kind of reinforce what we want to do as a team as well. There's also something we did like a house of culture. So that sounds very grandiose, but basically what that means in simple terms is that we have like a tier structure of like aspirations at the top, which is like the roof. And then we have things like technical ability, social aspects, the kind of things that the boys wanted the team to represent. And once again, they can give us their ideas. We had a Google form I mentioned earlier. they gave us their feedback, and then we then compiled that into something that's a physical live document where we was just before this current lockdown, so the timestamp for the pod, we're in January, guys. We were just in the process of creating some sort of PDF or some sort of card to give to the boys to see the house culture as well. So everything had a kind of like a team kind of motive, as in these are challenges within a competition. That's fun and you can get points for it, but ultimately at the end of it, there's going to be something for you to see physically and at the end of it as well. So there was always something in our mind of how can we get the boys working together, but also creating a bigger overarching challenge as well, which is like a contract, culture. These things are really powerful to a team as well.
That sounds really positive. That sounds like you're, a lot of the time, again, bringing it back to those sort of fundamentals of coaching. It's trying to deliver something that isn't always delivered in a direct way. It's delivering something in an indirect way and going, actually, even just getting a player thinking about those things, I think, will make them, the next time they're in a situation where they need to apply maybe respect to a teammate if something happens, or to really do something that is in there, they'll go, okay, I remember thinking about this then. And I remember that actually as a group, we came to an agreement on it. And that's really positive. I like that a lot. That's really good. And I think actually talking about that and the positive reinforcement for that, were there any prizes for this? Is there anything on the line for this?
Go on, Rob. I know you're desperate to reveal the prize.
Sure. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
That's before I say the caveat. Danny worked really hard to actually create this, so this was very organic. So even though these projects looked amazing, it was all handmade. And maybe one day, Danny, you can put on HTC and our website the pictures of these. But any budding FIFA fans watching or listening to the pods, you'll know that there's like FIFA cards where you have like the player's face and then the name, and then that attribute, so like 99 pace, 80 shooting, etc. We made personalized versions of those for each member of the team that actually won. That was the main prize. So took the pictures, put a little nickname for each player, added the attribute points, made the 99 for everything, of course, to boost their confidence. But you know, some of them are very good players as well. That was like the main number one prize, so that it was basically 4 or 3 of those, depending on how many players are in the team. And then the captain of the team got a bonus prize as well for basically leading it all. So got them a box of chocolates, which is always popular, I think, with him in the gift world. So that was it. And what pleased me, I don't know if you agree with this, Danny, we did that, and I loved them. I was like, I wanted the cards on one of these, and Danny actually made me Danny's draft version was one made for me, which I've got at home, which I love.
Love it.
But seeing their faces, like there was genuine joy. They got these, and they look quite cool. You know, it looks really well made. So props to Danny for doing that. His graphic design ability came to the fore there. But also, it's just the fact that the boys worked hard for the competition, so we wanted to make sure they got a prize at the end of it that justified their efforts. We think we did.
Yeah. No, thank you for that, Rob. Just to add as well, in each team there was a leader. There was someone from the leadership group. So the idea being that we had 6 teams. Which obviously consists of all 6 of our leadership group. So 1 leader per team. In those teams, they had probably 4 players, including themselves. So I think some teams had 3, some teams had 4. So there were small teams, but the incentive, obviously, in terms of them winning, being that they get that small chocolate prize, had a bit of something on the line. And then, I mean, to be fair, this idea of the competition kind of came from two past experiences, I guess, that we had maybe earlier in the year. So I'd worked with Harry, Coach Harry, who's obviously the men's team coach at Kinja. Friend of the podcast, as always. He ran a similar kind of thing in the summer, but he opened it out to the men's team and at the time my under 17s, and we did it as more of like a men's team versus under 17s.
Nice.
But because it was open, so it wasn't like it wasn't men's versus under 17s point by point. It was more like, okay, well, everyone, if the under 17s get a point, it's then done by like each individual player. So what ended up happening was we maybe had five or 10 people involved by the end of the competition. So it kind of just sort of fizzled out. So I think the approach when I spoke with Rob about trying to transfer that idea was, we have to try and keep it so that those at the bottom are still involved and they've got something to fight for, because there was some, obviously in lockdown number one, some of the players, they went because they were international players, international students, I guess. They went abroad, so their time zones are completely mucked up. So they missed all the deadlines, and they joined in maybe about 2 weeks in when they got 0 points, and everyone else got 100 points. Like, it's gone by that point. So I think the real lesson I learned from that was we need to keep those at the bottom involved. And one thing that Rob Razak and I did was we introduced a small forfeit for the losing team. We're actually, I mean, they are very, very lucky. I'm not going to lie. Given we're now in lockdown 3, they are lucky. Still waiting for them to perform their forfeit. They've got away with it just for the time being. But what actually happened was we still had, there was one team where, sadly, I think one of the actual leader in that group, he had to go away, and his time zones were completely mixed, so he couldn't really get involved. And some of the others in that group had also been a bit quiet. So it literally came down to one player dragging that team. And it got to the last point count that we did, where he actually dragged his team off the bottom single-handedly. And he got all their points and dragged them off the bottom. And yeah, so it made it interesting, even right at the end. There was still like a little twist and a turn. So that made it really good. And then just in terms of another experience where we can kind of transfer this from has been in the summer, early summer. I was working with ASL, the American School in London. They did like an online competition for all their sports, and it kind of ran quite similar in terms of students having to submit their entries via Google Forms. And then off the back of that, it was very, very cleverly done. That Akai, the mastermind behind it, did a lot of automated stuff behind the scenes. That obviously I have no skills in that, but yeah, the premise in terms of them having an online competition kind of came from that, really. So yeah, I mean, when we look back at the competition that we had, this lockdown showdown, as you said, which, funnily enough, I think was one of the first challenges for the teams, was coming up with a competition name. We had some dreadful names. Lockdown showdown we liked and we stuck with, but a lot of this is sort of organically, like lots of different challenges have come off the back of things. And as Rob said, when we saw this lockdown was going to happen, or that second lockdown was going to happen, and we had, an opportunity, I guess, to get things right off the pitch, and to get ourselves back in shape. And it was a golden opportunity, and I think the team have benefited a lot from it.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. It sounds like you're really accomplishing things that, I mean, that I'm not sure that other coach would have thought of. I know a lot of coaching is when it's at the grassroots, it can be okay. I volunteer to coach, I go down and I help and I do whatever. And then once we're in lockdown, I'll see you in however many weeks the government decide it's going to be this time. And then you come back and then maybe you don't know everyone as well as you did, especially at that age. I know a little bit older, it's a little bit easier to stay in contact. But it sounds really good that you're keeping the group together. And actually, I imagine that's going to come back and really help you with on the pitch performance, because everyone's going to be bought into each other. You've created new little groups in the team. People that, like you said at the beginning, maybe wouldn't have talked to each other or would have maybe said hello to each other as they get there. Maybe are doing things far more as a group. And that sounds really, really fantastic. And that sounds like you've taken something someone else has done and really made it work for your team. Something as simple as coming up with a name for the tournament, for the competition itself, I think is a genius, because you wouldn't have thought of that. You might have just gone, okay, I'll go on Google. Here's fun challenges you can do over Zoom. I mean, I myself, we've had family quizzes over this. You just throw a quiz up, everyone has a fun time. But it sounds like putting that time into it, you get that buy-in from the players. That's fantastic. And it really sounds like you've got a lot out of it. But if we are actually now talking about the lockdown showdown, as I sport the name earlier, is there anything that maybe, obviously we're going now into another lockdown, is it something you'll carry on? Is it something maybe you'll look to tweak at all as you go?
So just to jump in, sorry, Rob. I know he's eager. I won't chat for too long this time. But it's something we've posed to the boys. I think the worry and the concern that I, and obviously Rob has had when we've spoken in the past about it, is we don't want to go overkill, because a lot of these challenges that we did in the first one, the likes of the contracts, the House of Culture, those kind of activities can't really be redone now. Actually, since that lockdown, we only played one game. It's not a case of, sadly we can't, if it was a month or 2 months down the line, then maybe we can be like, well, we can revisit and sort of see, are we still here? Is there anything to add? I mean, we literally had one game after that, sadly. So it wasn't really an opportunity. But looking, because I've got it open here, we had 19 challenges, Rob. I don't know if you remember or realise that we had 19 challenges, and we gave away a total of 930 points.
Wow.
Jeez.
I did a bit of research beforehand to make sure we counted up the challenge number. So I thought we'd make sure we remember that. That's quite important, I think, as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to kind of echo what you just said there, that's kind of at my point to Charlie's question. The competition went well. All 6 teams overall were engaged with us as coaches and with each other as teammates. It started on, as you mentioned, November the 8th, which is Sunday. And I finished on December the 2nd, which was a Wednesday. So it was literally just over 3.5 weeks. So It was quite a lengthy, literally the whole period of November lockdown, we did it. So it was quite, I thought it was enjoyable, but quite intensive. Every 3 or 4 days, the boys had a new challenge to do. So they were not really bored. We constantly gave them different things to do in between. So I guess Danny and I are just a bit apprehensive about putting that level of engagement on them again. Expect them to all jump into it, because they've all got GCSEs. That's the year that we're working with, under 16s. They've all got other issues maybe going personally as well. So we just want to be careful to tread lightly, really, make sure that whilst the first one went well and we really enjoyed coaches and feedback was really positive from the boys from it, which is us, the whole reason we did it was to make sure they enjoyed it and hopefully gelled as a team. As you said earlier, we don't want to push our luck into another 3 to 4 weeks of a really big competition. Which by the end of it, they burn out from 2 challenges at home and like, no, don't do this anymore. So we'll see.
Yeah, sorry, just to jump in, bang on in terms of, I remember we was having that discussion, Rob, when potentially looking at discussions of the November lockdown extending into December. It was a case of, if it does extend, do we extend the tournament another 2, or the competition another 2 weeks? Do we do, and a really good suggestion, I think, from either yourself or Razak was, do we do round 2? So you won round 1, now we do round 2, and it's a 2-week blitz of as many challenges. I think we got really lucky. I'm not going to lie, in terms of having a month window, I think that was just about right. And I think the concern, obviously, we've done it before, it'd be a little bit overkill. But I think the other concern is we don't know how long this lockdown could last. So we could put in all the work now, and then, it could be say it's a 9-week lockdown. We spend 4 weeks, maybe even up to 6 weeks doing this competition, and then the final 3 weeks the chat is dead. That's almost 3 weeks, almost a month of the boys not having some kind of engagement with each other. So that's the concern. And this time around, Rob, Razak, and I, we've posed it to them. We've given them a few things to vote on as to what they would like to do. If I'm being honest, I think right now we've got to review those, but right now it's probably not looking likely that we'll do that one again just yet. But
that's interesting. Is there anything? So that's really interesting. Then you're talking about maybe it doesn't carry on, and I think that's totally. The fact you've done the first one, I think, is, like I said earlier, probably a step beyond what a lot of coaches have done. I know every club has tried to find a way to keep players engaged with the club, because you don't want to be coming back and having 4 people turn up to training because everyone else is like, oh, I forgot I have football, or I'm not that interested anymore. Is there anything else maybe that you look to do, that you're looking at doing, maybe other than a tournament, maybe some other, maybe, I don't know, just weekly things of getting back in touch with players and saying, okay, how's it going, sort of thing? Or is it very much a case of, I mean, none of us know how long this is going to last. The rules say a certain date. We don't know. Like you say, it could be 9 weeks. It could be 4 weeks. It could be 6 months by all we know at this point. Vaccines hopefully coming sooner than that, but obviously that's the case. Is there anything else you'd want to do, maybe, that you haven't necessarily broached with the team, or any ideas that you've had?
Rob, do you want to tackle this one first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Danny. So it's a good question, Charlie, because as we're in the midst of the third lockdown, Danny and Kazak and I have all sat down. I actually have a meeting tomorrow to go through this, but as May mentioned, we have given the boys a vote this time. So we gave them a voice, because lockdown Showdown, I think any coach at home will think of things to do. I think any sort of challenge into team event is a great idea. And we would, as coaches, I think Danny and I would say, definitely do something like that if you can, if it's the first time doing that. But they've done that before. Maybe ask the boys what they would like to do. And we gave them a couple of choices. Don't show was one of them. Doing the second version, 2.0, I think we called it. And then like a sequel.
Amazing.
Better than ever. And then we gave them some other stuff like FIFA tournament. So something nothing to do with coaching whatsoever, but something that they can just let some steam, have some fun, that we can kind of officiate and help them set up groups for that. Then we thought about maybe doing something quite psychological. So one of the challenges we did was a mindset talk by the club psychologist, the sports psychologist. So we thought about maybe doing something like that, or maybe reviewing some matches and doing some assessment work on pace of play. And then we also thought about what they would like to do. I think this is the popular one so far, I've noticed in the responses, is sort of physical activity. It's like a home workout kind of thing. So our club vice chairman, Coach Harry, we mentioned earlier, he did some ball mastery sessions during November, live streams where small skills you can do in a small area. So that might be an option for them. But I think our particular age group, they're at an age where I think they're quite into fitness and activities and exercise, basically. So I think that's probably more than I'm going to do. So they can lead on that, because obviously he's a fit one within the group. I'll sit there and clap. I'll clap, say, well done, guys, and blow whistle. But I think this time around there's going to be a lot more home activity work, I think, than some fitness, potentially.
Yeah. It's looking that way, I think. And one of the other things that we chucked in there was potentially doing like a player, not interview, but like player chats, having more sort of individual player chats. So having player meetings, that's the word I'm looking for. Because what we did over Christmas, and this was always the plan, that over Christmas we was going to do this, was they did a self-evaluation form. So they evaluated themselves as players in certain aspects, Some of them scored themselves really, really highly, which is great. Some of them scored themselves very, very humbly, very, very low. So maybe a player meeting or a player interview might be a good place to reflect and review those. Because what we do with those anyway is we're going to create something that will be tangible for the boys to take away and show their parents as well. So I can't say too much on that, but just in case they're listening. But the idea is it'll be something tangible. So we've already got that in groundwork. We probably look to maybe do something like that as well.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. It sounds like you've got a lot of options going forward, especially I think at the moment lots of people feel like they don't, and it's good to hear it and good to be able to. I mean, if there's coaches out there, I know me, I'm definitely going to be sat making some notes after this on what I can be doing with my team. But that's fantastic to hear, and I think that probably brings us to the end of the show. Unless you've got anything else to bring up on that front, if I've missed anything, it's my first time hosting, so you know.
Great job, Charlie.
You did a fantastic job. Yeah, fantastic job, Charlie. Thank you.
Anyway, yes, that brings us to the end of today's show. Importantly, Danny, I don't think I've ever asked you this question before. How can anyone listening follow you on social media? Where can we find you on the Twitter and on the Instagram?
Did that feel weird?
I did the Twitter and the Instagram, and I'm already worrying that was the wrong use of those terms.
No.
Very old.
I mean, it's the same on both. At Cook 1996, all one word.
Awesome. For those hot coaching tips, I've seen a few popping up. A few little comments. Awesome, love it. But anyway, Rob as well. How can we find you, Rob, on social media?
Okay, thanks, Charlie. So it's at Bobby, so Bobby, and then Manz, Manz.
Yeah, got that one down. Love it. Awesome. Good job. Thank you very much. And also, you can also follow Halftime Cuppa on Twitter using our handle at @halftime_Cuppa. My personal account is at Charlie Pumfrey. But you don't need to follow that. Follow the other two guys. Also, as mentioned at the start of the show, all of our shows, going back, all our conversations with coaches, honestly, if you're a coach and you're sat there now and you want to be able to hear a little bit more about how other coaches are doing it, I really, really recommend you go back and have a listen to a few of them. There are some fantastic conversations. Head over to the website at halftimecuppa.com and over on iTunes, just by searching for Halftime Cuppa over there. There's some awesome conversations. And also, if you're not a coach, you just want to hear about football, we have some awesome conversations about that as well. But thanks again to our panelists. Rob, thank you very much. Good to hear from you. Danny as well. Thank you for being a panelist, Danny.
Thank you. No, absolute pleasure. Cheers. Great job, Charlie.
Thank you very much. But until next time, stay safe, especially in these times, and goodbye.